He opened the car door for her and asked, tired, in that low, calm voice of his. She nodded, while giving a polite smile and slided in, telling herself not to overthink. She raised a glance at him. He wasn't looking at her now, just driving the car while watching the road ahead with calm focus. She was busy and admiring his side view. Suddenly, a call interrupted her focus, which made her startle for a second. He smirked when he noticed her every movement and yet didn't react and answered the call. Sir, came a female voice from the other line. What's it, Linda? He asked calmly, yet his voice is commanding enough to show the confidence. Ryan gulped, hearing his deep, husky voice. Sir, a pediatric case had come, but it has filed a medical legal case. For the procedure, we need a signature as committee medical officer. Coming. He answered curtly and hung up on the call and headed to the hospital with Ryan. Well, she didn't question anything. The hospital corridor hummed softly with activity, nurses walking past, distant monitors beeping faintly. She had been drawn to the waiting area, where a young mother sat with a baby, while Taehyung went to Triage department, where emergency procedures are done. The baby's curious eyes sparkled as he spotted her. His tiny fingers, fists, waving in the air, she couldn't resist. With the mother's nod, she bent down and gently lifted the child into her arms. Her expression softened instantly. The baby was so light, so warm, his tiny fingers brushed against her chin, making her smile shyly. For once, she looked nothing like the composed professor she always was, her face lit with an unguarded tenderness. Just then he came to stand beside her, the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to him. His gaze shifted from her face to the baby she held, and something deep, almost protective, flickered in his eyes. The mother chuckled, her voice playful yet sincere. You two would also make such a cute baby. The words landed like a spark. Her cheeks flushed instantly, a warm red rushing up to her ears. She froze for a moment, her lips parting in surprise. Then, almost instinctively, she lowered her gaze, clutching the baby just a little tighter, as if hiding her flustered expression behind his tiny frame. He noticed everything, the way her lashes fluttered nervously, the way her smile faltered shyly, the way she avoided his gaze. A slow smile curved on his lips, subtle but full of meaning. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low enough for her to hear. I think she's right. Her head snapped towards him, eyes wide, the blush deepening furiously across her face, which made her look like red tomato. Don't say that, she whispered sharply, more out of embarrassment than protest. He chuckled softly, not pressing further, but the warmth in his eyes lingered, making her heart beat faster. She turned away quickly, focusing on the baby, but her mind was restless, caught between the teasing words, the mother's comment, and the unspoken emotion she had just seen in his gaze. She tried to steady her heartbeat, focusing on the baby's soft cooing, but she could feel his gaze still on her, warm, steady, and unshakable. Your face is red, he murmured softly, leaning closer to only she could hear. There was no judgment in his tone, only a playful tease that made her cheeks burn even more. It's not, she whispered back quietly, shifting her eyes away, though the heat in her face betrayed her. He chuckled and expressed the sound low and gentle. It is, you're blushing. lips pressed together as she tried to compose herself. You shouldn't say that things like that here, she mumbled, almost scolding. The baby gurgled happily in her arms, as if amused by the quiet exchange. The mother only smiled knowingly, pretending not to notice. Finally, he reached out, steady, careful, and adjusted the blanket around the baby, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The simple touch sent a jolt through her, and she froze her eyes, darting to his face. He didn't look flustered at all. Instead, he wore a calm expression. "You look happy just now," holding him suited you. He cooed softly. Her breath caught, and she lowered her gaze instantly, her lashes shielding her eyes. She wanted to protest, to dismiss his words, but deep down, they stirred something warm in her chest, something she didn't dare name. He didn't press further. Instead, he stepped back slightly, allowing her space. Though his smile lingered, gentle and unhurried, it was enough to leave her restless, her heart whispering questions she had never asked before. The day had finally ended. She sat at her desk in her bedroom, the faint glow of a study lamp spilling across her scattered papers and books. The city outside was hushed, but her heart was unsettled. But no matter how she tried, her mind refused to calm down. Every time she closed her eyes, the mother's teasing words, "You too would also make such a cute baby." Her cheeks warmed just remembering it. But more than words, what lingered was him. The way he stood beside her, calm yet unshakable presence. The way his eyes softened when he saw her holding the child. The way his voice has dropped, teasing but gently blushing. She pressed her palms to her face, groaning softly to herself. She remembered how his hand had brushed hers when he adjusted the baby's blanket, how he had said, "It suited you." His words replayed in her chest like a quiet melody, one she couldn't ignore. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, her lips curved without a permission, a small shy smile quickly hidden as if someone might see. Just then a knock was heard, which made her to quickly open the door. "Dad, come in." "You can just come by knocking." Her father didn't respond but entered in and laid on the bed, opening his arms. She instantly smiled and quickly hugged him while laying on the bed. "So, you have met him?" he asked softly, making her surprised. "How do you know?" she asked while her dad chuckled and answered. "He met me personally in the afternoon and asked my permission to pick you from the university. And also he apologized for yesterday's incident of him leaving in the middle." "What?" She was quite surprised after knowing all these things. "The family thinks he is a good match." "Dad, you trust him?" "I can see your heart is restless. I know he loves you more than you think, and that's enough for me." "Loves me? Did he know me?" "I know enough of it, but it's not my story to tell." He quickly dismissed the topic before she can pry into the matter. "So, now tell me honestly, is it a yes?" Her throat tightened, every memory of his gaze, the way Taehyung looked at her, the quiet intensity in his presence came rushing back. It terrified her, and yet something inside whispered it was unavoidable, inevitable. Finally, she lifted her eyes to meet her father's. "Yes," she whispered. It was barely a word, more like a breath, carried on trembling lips. Her father's expression softened, relief and quiet pride filled flickering across his face. Good, he murmured almost to himself. That's all I. Sleep well, my daughter. Tomorrow will be the first step into your new life. He left the room with quiet dignity, closing the door behind him, and she laid there on the bed, heart pounding, replaying her own whisper over and over in her head. Yes. The word bound her future, and she could already feel its weight pressing it from all sides. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes. God, her voice was hushed, barely audible. If this is your will, then let it happen. If he is the one you have chosen, then give me the strength to accept it. The silence stretched. Only the faint night breeze rustling the curtains. Her heart steadied slightly as she whispered the last words. Amen. The night while she laid on the bed, replaying the today's instance, while he was somewhere else in his own quiet space, thinking of her too. But his thoughts were not near. For her, this engagement was something recent, an arrangement between families, a bond she was still awkwardly learning to accept. But for him, she had been part of his world for years. Since her teenage days, he had been watching from a distance. At first, it was just subtle glimpses of her walking. The way she tucked her books close to her chest, the nervous smile she gave strangers. Over time, it grew into something deep, something he couldn't shake. He had followed her progress silently, the university entrance, her late night study habits, even the small caves she used to visit after classes, always from afar, always unseen. He told himself it wasn't wrong. He only wanted to protect her, to make sure no one hurt her, to make sure she never felt alone. And when families began speaking of marriage, he saw his chance. He didn't fight it, didn't resist. Instead, he quietly encouraged the arrangement, presenting himself as a stable, respectable doctor, the perfect match. On the surface, it looked like fate, a family decision, but to him, it was a fulfillment of silent pursuit. At the hospital earlier, when he saw her holding the baby, her blush at the teasing words, her nervousness around him, it wasn't just a sweet moment. It was proof that she could be his in more than name, that the life he had imagined wasn't unreachable. Sitting in his chair, his white coat folded neatly beside him, he allowed himself a small private smile. She doesn't know it, he thought, but one day she will. One day she'll understand how long I have loved her, how much of her life I have carried with me. For her, it was just a shy beginning, confusion wrapped in warmth. For him, it was destiny, finally taking shape after years of watching, waiting, and quietly weaving himself into her future. And he had made sure her father knows everything about his obsession before talking about the marriage. After leaving her room, her father walked slowly down the hall, his hands folded behind his back. He paused by the window, looking out into the quiet street where the young doctor's car had often appeared, parked at odd hours. He had noticed it years ago, the lingering looks, the way the boy's eyes never wavered from his daughter. It wasn't something he ever spoke of, not to her, not to anyone, but he had known. Tonight, hearing her whisper yes, he felt both relief and a quiet unease. The father's chest tightened. As a parent, it should have alarmed him, but instead, he had seen something else in the young man's eyes, a promise. As long as that love doesn't hurt her, he whispered into the night air, then maybe it will keep her safe when I no longer can. The sun was soft that morning, slanting through the curtains as she dressed carefully, nerves fluttering in her stomach. Today wasn't just about clothes. Today meant sitting beside him alone on the way to choose the outfit she would wear when the leaves were bound together. When she stepped in outside, he was already waiting, leaning against his car, crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the faintest tiredness beneath his eyes. Hospital night shifts hadn't dulled his appearance. The moment his gaze landed on her, the world around seemed to still. "You are late," he said simply, though his lips curved faintly, as if the complaint was only for show. She faltered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Dad was talking to me." His eyes flickered briefly, almost knowingly. Then he opened the car door for her. "Get in." The drive was quiet at first, filled only with the hum of the engine and the muted rush of traffic. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Every moment, every breath felt magnified in the silence. Finally he spoke, voice low. "You are nervous." Her heart jumped. "I'm not." "You are," he interrupted, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Your hands always tremble when you are nervous." Her eyes widened. How do you? "I've seen it," he said calmly, not looking away from the road. "More times than you think." He crept into her cheeks, her pulse hammering. She turned her gaze back to the glass, unable to meet his. When they arrived at the boutique, the parents were already waiting inside, chatting with the designer. She breathed a sigh of relief, as though their presence diluted the tension. But when she stepped into the first dress, soft ivory lace fitted delicately at her waist, his eyes followed her like a shadow. Her mother clapped in delight. Her father smiled warmly. The designer praised the fit, but it was his gaze, steady, unblinking, burning with something deeper than admiration, that made her skin heat beneath the fabric. Saleswoman, "Your fiancé won't be able to look away on the wedding day." And the saleswoman teasingly said. Her heart nearly stopped because he already wasn't looking away. Inside the boutique, fabrics and lace glowed under the soft lights. Parents chattered with the designer, flipping through catalogs, debating shades of ivory and green. But for her, time moved differently. Every step, every breath felt magnified under his gaze. She stepped out of the fitting room in second gown, a silk dress with delicate embroidery along the neckline. Her mother gasped. "Beautiful, it suits you perfectly." But she didn't look at her mother. She felt it stare, heavier than the fabric itself. When she finally met his gaze, he wasn't smiling. His gaze dragged slowly from her shoulders down to a curve of her waist, lingering just a fraction too long before lifting back to her face. The intensity made her throat go dry. Flustered, she turned back. But just as she reached for the curtain, she felt it, his hand brushing against hers, deliberate, stopping her. "Wait," he murmured low enough that only she could hear. Her heart stuttered. She turned slightly, finding him closer than she expected to. Close. His presence surrounding him. He leaned in, his breath grazing her ear. "Don't change it, I want to see you." Her knees weakened at the raw honesty in his tone. "Someone will notice," she whispered nervously, while starting towards the parents. "They're busy," he replied calmly without moving her. His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Her chest rose and fell quickly, heat flushing her cheeks. She wanted to step back to break the spell, but her feet won't move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stepped away, his composure returning as though nothing had happened. But when she slipped back behind the curtain, her hands were shaking too much. The days blurred quickly after the shopping trip. Family, friends, endless chatter about flowers, food, and invitations. Yet through it all, she found her thoughts tangled with him. Every time she recalled him, her cheeks burned. The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden haze, sunlight spilling into her room. Her mother fussed over her hair. Her aunt adjusted jewelry while she sat still, heartbeat thumping in her ears. Downstairs guests were already gathering, laughter echoing through the halls. but she felt none of it, only the weight of what waited at the end of the day. Her father peeked into her room. Are you ready? His eyes softened at the sight of her in a bridal dress. You look like your mother did on our wedding day. She smiled faintly, though nerves curled into her chest. Dad. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. Remember what you prayed that night. If this is God's will, then walk forward without fear. Her eyes widened slightly. She hadn't told him about it, and yet nodded. She finally stepped into the hall. Eyes turned towards her, whispers of admiration floating around, but her gaze found only him, waiting at the altar.